Please introduce yourself.
Hi there, my name's Karsten Lomax. I'm a fourth year CHID student, double majoring with CMS, and I'm very excited to be here with you today.
And you want to talk cancel culture, right?
That's right, yeah. I am teaching a focus group this quarter called Cancel Culture and Conspiracy, and so I wanted to come, explain my discoveries this far.
Okay. Please explain. I have a lot of questions, such as, what's your most controversial opinion? So we could get into that.
We can get there, yeah.
But yeah, just talk about your class a little bit, how it's been going.
Yeah, so it's basically just a weekly discussion group type of thing. Very low stakes, 2-credit class. So I don't have a lot of materials that I assign, but I personally do a lot of research and collect a lot of material and texts that I then present to my students, and then I try to get their reactions. I really want to know what people are thinking, and so I really try to push my students to kind of say the first thing on their mind instead of trying to filter out a eloquent response. Yeah.
And what has been the most exciting conversation you've had with your students?
So each week we've had like a sort of different focus for our topic, and I think when we were talking about corporations and multinationals and just capitalism in general, we had a lot of very good discussion. I was very pleased that day.
How so?
Just because, I like to talk a lot, and so my goal for myself has been to open up space for other people to speak. And I just like it when they do say anything. And a lot of students are very smart, and there's this stigmatization of speaking up in class. And since that's basically all we're doing, I really depend on them to participate. And so, especially when I'm stuck on something that's like as tricky as like consumerism or fast fashion.
Sure.
I like to bounce it off of other people, and we can all learn together that we understand these issues quite similarly, and it affects everyone. Like we're all sort of perplexed at how to address our own actions in regard to I guess just the larger system, or if we're truly powerless, what can be done.
Yeah. It seems like you're asking really hard questions about agency and how much, agency we have on in our own lives. Exactly. And, how, I think we all know the world sucks. But to what extent does the world suck because of our own individualist, self-centered, perspectives, right? I'm gonna talk about a movie really quick. So I saw Bottoms recently.
I still need to see it.
It's a great movie.
I really want to.
And what I really liked about Bottoms is that it does have these themes of like a self-victimization and what that means, particularly through like a feminist lens, right?
Yeah.
And and the movie plays around with it in a very controversial way, and I think to a very like mainstream audience. To me, I think it's just very fun. Like the premise being 2 lesbians start a fight club in school, so they could get laid by cheerleaders, and that's like so off the wall. But in terms of like its core, philosophy, I think the film brings up very like honest and very well balanced questions as to what it means to take hold of yourself. And maybe this is let's get into controversial opinions. I don't think most people are honest with themselves.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, definitely not. I know I'm not a lot of the time.
Okay.
And I think it's a really challenging thing, and the first step is kind of becoming aware of, your own biases, but then that comes with a lot of shame and guilt, and I think
totally
that can further push people to shut down, which is the last thing you should be doing when, maybe you're lacking education or awareness of certain issues.
Yeah.
And a lot of us will just read what's people are saying online or just see the headlines and go along with it, and we never really question. And I think that's a broader thing that we try to challenge, especially in CHID, is that people don't want to think for themselves, or we're conditioned not to, and you just take what is told to you and you believe it to be true.
Oh yeah, no, everything is, especially in a liberal city like Seattle, in
The bubble.
Yeah, the bubble, in a very liberal environment like academia, especially in UW sometimes. We tend to not think about, calling out people this way, cancel culture in this way. But to me, I feel like it's just another form of just shaming another person for your own benefit. What is that benefit? I personally don't think there's much except for like temporary, just like glee that you powered over somebody. But that's just my opinion. But I do sense that, there are some things I think we both know we can't say in an environment like this.
For sure.
And I don't know. I think a lot of it has to do with identity personally. But before we get into that, I do want to ask, what have you noticed, like, from students in your focus group? Like, what gets them nervous? What gets them, like, to pause for a second and be like, wait a minute, I gotta choose my words carefully?
Yeah, there's been lots of crickets at times when I'll turn something on to the class and people don't want to speak up. Issues like what businesses or corporations you support. I think we're all guilty of shopping at Amazon.
Sure.
Sometimes it's really convenient, but whenever you ask someone, oh, where'd you get that? And like, oh, you're not gonna like it. It's from Amazon. It's from Shein.
Yeah.
There's like a shame around that, but yeah, we still all shop there.
Yeah.
And so also talking about religion. When we had this discussion recently, and there were lots of issues that I was presenting. Yeah. Kind of the shadier side of what happens amongst the church, and a lot of us are raised in certain faiths. We don't choose what we believe in, and so especially when you first come to college, first move out, you're exposed to all this newness, especially coming to Seattle from maybe a rural area, even out of state. Yeah. And, you want to hold on to your faith, but then also you kind of realize a lot of the issues that have been perpetuated by specifically Christianity, but also all the religions really in our world, and how it still affects us. And I don't want people to say something or not say something in the fear that they're wrong or uninformed, because that's where we can have discussions when people misjudge things or say something that could not always be correct. And there's the whole idea of correctness is so fascinating to me, because truth too, like there's just really no such thing, and it's something that's different for everybody. And so it can be scary when your own thoughts are something you think you only have. Okay. But oftentimes everyone's thinking it and they're just too afraid to say it.
Do you have a thought in mind when you say that?
Well, I kind of think a big thing we discussed is this conversation about art versus artist, or kind of separating the two. Yeah. There's lots of extremely famous artists that are known to be not great people. Sure. But then the work they've done and the things they've created and just the impact they've had is undeniable. And so when you are talking about Kanye West or Michael Jackson or even Dr. Luke, who people don't talk about enough. Oh yeah. We all listen to these songs and artists still, and some of us have different stakes in it. Like for instance, a lot of Jewish people I know take real issue with Kanye West comments, and he said some horrible things. Totally. Like DEFCON 3 on Jewish people, and he really came from this position where he thought he could say whatever he wanted, and he was getting away with lots of damaging comments. But I know for me, I'm not a Jew, so I don't like, it's not, the stakes aren't as high for me. But then when, I had a conversation with another person about Michael Jackson, and I was like, he completely changed pop music.
Yeah.
And then from her perspective, she was like, but when I hear his voice, all I can think of are the faces of his victims. And I too was victimized in a similar way, which I was like, wow, that is a perspective I did not have until now, because I never considered, the stakes of, being a victim of abuse and then seeing somebody so championed and pedestalized.
Yeah.
When they've committed crimes like that.
Yeah. To me, the first thing I think about when you're talking about this is, and I think this is just generally how pop culture has gone about problematic artists, is that, for the most part, a lot of them are black men.
Exactly. It's mostly people of color, you'll see.
Yeah. And, that doesn't, deny or remedy anything bad they've done. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that's the pattern that we see in mainstream media. Whereas you mentioned Dr. Luke.
He was in court.
Yeah.
So, and some of our most beloved pop stars still work with him.
Yeah.
And I believe even, it was Kim Petras. I don't know if she stands by this comment now, but she said, oh, I would not work with, a sexual predator.
Yeah.
And she said that after, Kesha.
Yeah.
Ended her contract with him and went to court. And you still see a lot of even Nicki Minaj.
Yeah.
And then, speaking of Nicki Minaj, you have this whole circle of public figures and celebrities that just seem to be uncancelable.
Totally.
And I see it as something that is very selective. After I put together a bunch of examples, I looked at Kanye West, I looked at Azalea Banks, I looked at Doja Cat, and then I was like, oh my God, they are all people of color. Yeah. And then I flipped it over on the class, and we looked at the kings of late night television, the two Jimmys, Steven, and they've been in comedy for decades. Yeah. They've done a lot of, very risky, problematic jokes. I mean, Jimmy Fallon did blackface in 2000, and yet they're still on television. They're still have this huge platform. Yeah. And so it's totally selective, and you see those people that are at the top of the patriarchy getting very little, having very few consequences for their behavior in the past.
Yeah, and these are all cis white men who've not only have done something shitty, but have consistently been shitty to underrepresented people, minorities too. So this is where the discussion is going to turn to identity for a bit.
Please,
because I'm not sure if you know who ContraPoints is.
No, I've heard that name.
Yeah, a famous YouTuber, white trans woman. But as a trans woman, I feel like I'm able to say a lot more controversial opinions. Sure. Because I think people tend to, view my own experience as not within, whatever hive mind that they think that they occupy, that I'm separate from it. Right. Therefore, my opinion holds a lot more weight, which I think is stupid. But in a liberal environment like this, I'm going to take advantage of it.
For sure.
And I am not afraid to say something like that, because it has not been until I have been more outspoken and been more, critical of maybe how I feel and the structures that are just kind of implicitly put onto me, that people have been taking me serious. To where constantly I love to refer to myself as a because I think that's super powerful to me. Yeah. And it scares other people, and I see it.
Right, in public too, you'll be maybe speaking so casually, and it can be very alarming to that bystander walking past. Yeah. And I think what's good is people do mind their own business here. But I've gotten into trouble with it's a time and place sort of thing. And
sure.
One time I was at work and I was just cussing. I was like, oh,
yeah.
And my coworker, who's also
sure.
was like, you can't say that here. This is a public place. there are customers here.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, like, people don't take too well to this word, and they think, maybe I'm using it in a derogatory way.
Sure.
Which it has been an ugly word.
Yeah.
But for me, I think it's funny. And a lot of people do too. And I think what's been complicated is, sort of finding out where I lie in, like, the identity intersectionality spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
And I've definitely gotten in trouble, for saying things that I thought I could say.
Sure. And
then, thankfully I have people around me that will check me and be like, no, like, stop saying that. And, there's still some terms and language that, I will use, amongst my friends.
Yeah.
But a lot of that, I could get myself, say, canceled for saying.
I have a lot to say, but I'll condense it into a story.
Please.
So I recently came back from Montana. Yeah, that's a fine reaction. I was only there for a few days, but I'm a curious person. I like going to places where maybe I'm not as welcome, especially
for sure.
Montana, which is like a very red state.
Mm-hmm.
And immediately as soon as I got off the plane in Bozeman, like there was like two burly guys behind me as I was going to a baggage claim, and one of them said, like, not a lot of trans folks around here, which is
just to themselves, or like at you?
To themselves. Ugh. And at first I was like, did I mishear that? like did he say trains? but it's just like that didn't make any sense in terms of like the context. And like consistently, I would say every day I encounter like moments of transphobia that were like super obvious.
Yeah.
Whereas because now I dress very femme, and now I know, especially over there, I realize that if I cover my face a certain way, I do pass. Until I start speaking, and
exactly,
and then like yeah, and then men have like this gay panic kind of thing going on, which I think is super hilarious.
It can be funny, but then
yeah,
it's also frightening. Like,
totally,
what danger or harm could you like possibly be in once they find out that, oh, you're not who I thought you are.
Exactly. No, I agree with you. I'm a stupid traveler, but in like the best way. So I spent like 8 hours one day just like driving, and I hit like a stretch of rural Montana that I don't think a lot of people go down. And for like 2 hours, I just ran into town where it was open carry.
Wow.
It was just bunch of guys with assault rifles, and I am not.
That's insane.
Yeah, it's insane. So I was like, I can't stop here. But I need to put gas, so how am I going to do this? And it was really scary, but maybe it's because of how my brain works. It kind of felt like a challenge also.
Exactly.
Which, I don't know. So what I'm trying to say with all this is, like, Montana, like, I love the state.
Beautiful state.
Beautiful state. And even with the shitty moments, if I really have to be honest with how I felt with it, other shit happened that I'm not going to mention on this podcast because it goes into some iffy territory. But like overall, I was honest to myself when I came back. I was like, why don't I feel horrible? Like,
exactly.
Some shitty
I don't belong here. I shouldn't be in places like that. But
yeah,
you can go anywhere.
And
you are an American citizen, so.
Kinda, yeah.
Well,
yeah. I mean, I agree with that. I mean, like this is kind of like a meme in the office, but I do like traveling in the U.S. I think there's like a lot of cool places in the country.
Yeah.
But more importantly, I think what I got from my trip is like, even though I encountered this very blatant bigotry that I don't usually encounter, I kind of like that I experienced it to some degree.
Right.
Because it showed me that these people, they're totally okay with being transphobic, and they do not hide it. And one thing that I think gets me kind of anxious in Seattle sometimes is this respectability politics, where people don't have any sort of moral or ethical through line. They just kind of have assumptions about people and their values, which I think is, honestly, for me, like, it bothers me too much because it feels like I'm delusional a lot of the time.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you have any, of your own experience and opinions in a similar way.
No, yeah, I think I mean, the liberal is definitely to be feared, and
Yeah.
I think they can almost be more hateful or I don't know. Like, there's something nice about it. Like, oh, at least you're being homophobic to my face.
Yeah.
Like, there's just it's just out in the open, and I think here, you know, it's not going to be as obvious, and you're kind of left to sort of wonder, or it's not super clear. And I also wanted to address what you said about like being a stupid traveler.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of like benefits to that, and I like, you know, there's this whole idea of like mindful travel.
Yeah.
But I think being a stupid traveler means, you know, you're already admitted to yourself maybe that you don't know a lot about where you're going or what you're going to encounter, and then since you're learning along the way, you're open to having your idea and minds changed. Like the South is totally villainized and seen, you know, there's so many laws that come out of there, and
Yeah.
so many people that are raised just to, you know, they think it's okay,
Yeah.
or they can get away with like, you know, saying or even like, you know, causing physical harm to people.
Yeah.
But I think I don't know, it almost takes like a stupid traveler to, you know, you can't go to a new place with preconceived ideas, because it's something you do have to learn for yourself and find out. And it totally depends on the people you're with too. I wouldn't recommend being a stupid traveler by yourself. You definitely want to do it with a buddy.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of what we hear about these places aren't always going to be true all the time.
Sure.
And there's lots of lovely people in the South, lots of queer, gay, people of color that are liberal, and they live there all the time. And there's been moments in our country's history where that behavior was common everywhere, right?
Totally.
And I think, like, you know, you almost can't be bothered by it, because it's all about how you react to it, right? And if you're going to this place and, I don't know, like, you can take it really personally and be like, wow, like, I really don't belong. Oh my gosh, they hate people like me here.
Yeah.
Or you can just see their situation as someone that's so close-minded, and you know, they think they know a lot about you probably.
Yeah.
And I think if they were like decent at all, they would, you know, probably try to have a conversation with you and realize you're just another human being. And like, that's one of the beautiful things when you go and talk to people in different places. Like, don't come in with any preconceived ideas.
Yeah.
Or like, oh, you're gonna say something bad, because
Yeah.
a lot of the times these people don't even mean it really, or they're just very out of touch. And I mean, you know, you do not see a lot of trans people in the South. That's just
for sure. That's
the case.
fact. Yeah.
And so almost, I feel like, you know, we kind of have to show them. We have to go into these spaces, because what are we encouraging when it's like, oh, we're going to go to our urban centers and be safe, because then you're just having all the queers in the city, and then the rural spaces can stay homophobic.
Yeah.
So I think, you know, stay being a stupid traveler, go with a friend, and you get to see all these places. Don't let anything prevent you from, you know, fears, even like going abroad to somewhere like where being gay is criminalized.
Yeah.
You know, that's an issue in itself, but honestly, like, you don't, I mean, people even will travel to North Korea.
Sure.
And, you know, you just,
I've been to North Korea.
yeah, well, so you can't, like, you don't want to bring too much attention to yourself, and obviously as a queer person, all eyes are already on you.
Yeah.
And so at that point, how I see it is just, I'm just here. And I think people here are kind of more good at minding their business, and in the South, it seems like people are always in your business.
Yeah.
They're very curious.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the time their hate comes from a place just of curiosity. And, you know, I've had an awkward line of questionings come from people even around here where they're like, explain to me how you got to this place with your identity. And, you know, sometimes I do feel the need to, like, you know, tell the life story, but also a lot of time I'm like, you know, it's not something I actually have to explain to you. And it's not something that quite makes a lot of sense to me, so.
Yeah. No, I mean, you're bringing up, I agree with everything you said. I mean, gosh, where should I continue? I'm going to continue in terms of, I think there is kind of difference in presentation is more of like the biggest thing for me in terms of like location to location. Like for example, in Montana, I did encounter some really nice people, and all of them were like older women, and
of course.
Yeah, they were super friendly to me, and I was just like, oh, okay, that's sweet. And you know, I think that kind of homeliness is actually one of the reasons why I want to travel in the South more often.
Yeah,
I visited.
The hospitality culture is
it's kind of real,
way better than here. It's non-existent.
Yeah, and
in
you know,
Seattle.
like people think it's weird that I want to travel in Arkansas, but it's just like.
I would go to Arkansas. I have friends out there. Like,
yeah,
I went to South Carolina, and it was my first time like going to the South to visit a friend.
Yeah,
and I was fine.
Yeah,
I mean, I definitely tried to present myself in a way that I feel like I'm very androgynous in Seattle, and then I definitely tried. I only packed like pants and shorts.
Yeah.
So I was like, all right, I have to blend in a little bit. I already have like so many piercings.
Yeah.
This long hair. People always think I'm a woman.
Sure.
And, I don't care what they think I am as long as they're not like trying to hurt me.
Well, it's also like, so in this city, I feel like in most cities, you're going to experience probably both at some point, just because there's a lot of people that live here. And a
lot of people.
It's interesting that you're bringing up like there is a difference, and I think it's probably my own anthropological curiosity in people in general, which is why I like traveling also. Let's take what we're doing right now, liberals and non-liberals. Let's just do that. So like I feel like what annoys me with a lot of people, very similar to an experience you just mentioned, it's like they are curious about you, but they're curious about you in like, kind of like a very detached sort of way. Like, ooh, I want to know more about you. You're an interesting looking person.
You're so confused. Like what is wrong with your mind?
Yeah.
You're so mentally ill that you are like this. And they need to understand how, which is crazy because this idea of understanding and labels that we have, and you name something, it.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the time it kind of goes back to that fear of being wrong, but I don't know, the most open people are going to be the ones that are able to admit, oh, I actually don't know a whole lot. And like, let me first not make assumptions, but then also just welcome the idea of being wrong and not be so ashamed of making a mistake.
Totally.
And I think, with, pronouns, that becomes an issue. Because a lot of people, that is so core to their identity, how they wish to be labeled.
Sure.
And I do think labels stem from, like, a heteronormative, patriarchal way of just, like, I don't know, it's so binary, right? And humans are so much more complex than that. And I think a lot of the argument against pronouns amongst conservatives is like, oh, like, I made a mistake, or, oh, and I think everyone makes mistakes.
Yeah.
But, sometimes a lot of the time it can seem like it's coming from a place of ill intent. And, you're intentionally misgendering somebody or using pronouns that they don't identify with. Yeah. And a lot of people, I think, more nowadays than maybe like even 10 years ago, where it's easier to just correct. Yeah. And, you don't have to be ashamed. It is a very easy mistake. And sometimes people, they just will say he, they'll just say she, and it's so ingrained in, like, we're all conditioned to use these words. Yeah. And so, but I don't know, if conservatives weren't like so upset with, the shame of being wrong, or the way that they're shamed for using wrong words, then they could maybe just realize, like, we're not trying to make you feel so guilty. Yeah. It's just, it's the difference between the call out versus like the call in, like, let me explain this to you. And then if they're not going to be receptive to it, if they're just going to be mean, and if they don't, then like, your time is not even like worth trying to get them to change. Oh yeah. And change really is something that people will only find on their own. Totally. But being wrong, opens up that path towards correction a lot sooner than just rolling with these false sort of ideas.
God, there's so much I want to talk about, but unfortunately, we kind of have to be strategic in our lives.
Right.
And that's something that, like, I try to implement just, like, casually, even though it's not, like, that big of a deal. Like, I do just, throw out, like, I'm trans or I'm underrepresented or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And I throw that in conversation while I'm talking about, the bigger picture of things.
Right.
Because people tend to resonate with that for whatever reason, which is so annoying. But I think it also serves a purpose in terms of, my own thinking as to, like, what should change in discourse with one another. And I'm so sick of politeness. I'm so sick of it. I think the current, like, trap artists know what's up, because I agree with rage. I feel like rage is productive. I don't know about this. Yeah. I feel like once I've, like, once I know where I should put my rage and, like, my conversation and my words, I feel like people tend to take me more serious.
Yeah,
it's just,
exactly.
It's just through a different lens. It's just through, calling myself because I'm Hispanic, It's just these things.
Yes.
Like using them to your advantage, using these strong words to your advantage. People resonate with that.
Yeah.
And maybe because they're kind of scared of those words, particularly white people. But, like, they hit hard. And I don't know. I am really happy with, like, a lot of folks in this space, because I feel like I am allowed to, have these opinions. Like, I'm really happy that, like, Martha Dina is our admin, because I think Martha Dina is, like, a super cool person, and it's just, like, willing to listen. And most people are not willing to listen.
Exactly.
I mean, talking on activists, okay. As someone part of the activism scene in Seattle, I'm not going to say much, or else my social
be
group,
careful.
My social group is going to collapse.
Yeah.
But some of the shittiest people I've ever met have been in activist spaces.
Yeah.
And they've hurt me more than, like, any conservative can ever hurt me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, I don't know, what you were saying about, like, politeness, I know that I'm guilty of being, like, a people pleaser, and I don't want to upset anybody, and that's, like, sort of the tiptoeing around, like, oh, like, sometimes I just don't like you, maybe I just don't want to be around you. And I think I see a lot of activists, they'll be out in the streets, say, the opposition on the other side, and, like, you're just gonna scream and kind of waste your breath, maybe hurt your vocal cords. Totally. And it's like, I'm happy that, some people just do need to scream, but also, like, I think taking care of yourself is knowing when, that energy put into that situation is going to be a waste of your energy and time. And I think people should scream, like, just go outside, let it out. But also, like, don't damage yourself, because, these instruments we have, our bodies, like, it's good to assemble in large numbers. Chanting, I think, is very good.
Totally.
But also, I don't think activism is always, picket lines, and I also don't think it's always sharing an Instagram story caption that you didn't read.
Agree.
And I don't know, I think a lot of people are pushed to be silent because they don't know what the issue is, or they're afraid of being wrong. And a lot of people definitely do publish and put out information that they don't think twice about. But then I think this whole conversation about, like, oh, remember your silence, why are you staying silent?
Yeah.
Like,
great question.
You're already pushing these people into the corner, making them fear, like, being wrong and saying the wrong thing. And so, I don't know, with cancel culture, it sucks because there is that good and evil, like, oh, you're bad, you're good. It's so binary. And I don't know, I want to see it more focused on, like, just change. And not all change is going to be great, but I think it's necessary to move us forward. And activism is, like, a very slow thing, and
performative, as you said.
Yeah. And so I think sometimes, a lot of people are just talking to avoid when you're trying to have a conversation with someone that won't listen to you.
Yeah.
And I've definitely been guilty, and I've challenged myself recently to try to listen to people I otherwise wouldn't have. Like, a lot of my friends, they love to talk about their boyfriends or their relationships, and I was like, I don't understand that at all.
Sure.
But once I like sat down and like started listening, I was like, wow, I can actually change my mind or see a different perspective, and just being open to it. And it goes back to that idea of like being uncomfortable. And I think, queer marginalized people, especially in the activism scene, like, black trans women, for instance, are like, they're so marginalized in society, and a lot of the burden to cause change falls on them. And we see a lot of trans activist leaders, and like, no, it's like, not something that you should be doing, but because of your life circumstances, you happen to be in this positionality where, someone that's been sheltered their whole life, never experienced any marginalization, how are they going to start a movement when it's like second nature maybe to like a queer person to, just question everything.
Totally.
And so I think while like, there is the legitimate side to Candace Owens' argument, like, oh, why do black people have to come in and explain racism and fight racism? It should be you doing that. Yeah. And, I think there's just so much knowledge that people will never gain because it's something you can only have by living that experience. And so that's why listening is so important. And I know there's so many stories that I hear, and I say to myself, I will never understand what that is like, but I can hear it and logically understand. And, maybe if I care or if I give a fuck about this person at all, like I can care and, stand behind them, or maybe in front of them too. It totally depends. And I don't know, there's lots of, I would love to see everyone duke it out. Like sometimes you just need to fight physically, maybe like rage, or like get that punching bag and scream and cuss. And I don't know, there's like this whole like idea of professionalism, like, why are you raising your voice at me? Like, I don't know, just listen instead of. And I mean, it is scary to like have someone yelling at you, but if that's what it takes for you to hear them, then like maybe you've been ignoring them for quite a while. It takes a while for us to get to that point. We're not always like, oh, like, why are you so angry? Why are you so angry? Like, you're not listening.
You should watch Bottoms. Bottoms has these themes in the movie.
I need to.
And it's so good.
I'll put it at the top of my list.
So I'm going to respond to that, and this is also going to close this episode.
Sounds good.
With a story, because I talk in stories.
The best.
So last year, I met someone who became a really good friend of mine for a year. They were the loudest, most mentally ill person I've ever met.
Those people are my favorite.
Yeah, and I really resonated with them. Yeah. And they taught me a lot about myself, probably because, they had like a list of disorders, BPD, DID, et cetera. So like, their own ethical foreground kept on changing, just based on just who they are mentally. And it was kind of obvious, and it was interesting because a different day I would feel like they're the different person, and that's something I just kind of felt just because of how they were socializing. Vibes and, like vibes are like
it's
exist.
So real. It's the only way I can describe it is vibes.
Yeah, totally. And unfortunately, this person, they did something super shitty to me and my friends earlier this year, to where I had no choice but to cut them out of my life. But I still think about them because, some part of me misses them because they, weren't the most honest person. Sometimes they were the biggest liar I've ever met. But, that in itself also told me, like, what it means to lie and what it means to lie for power. Yeah. But more than anything, when they were honest, they taught me some really important shit that, like, I still kind of think about when I'm existing. The biggest one would be how they socialize with houseless people. We were hanging out at the park last summer, and I think it was Volunteer Park. And this person was having like a mental breakdown. Like, he was screaming, he was like throwing shit, he was like punching trees and shit. He was having like a very hard time. And my ex-friend, they were like, oh, it seems like they're breaking down. I'm gonna ask them if they need food or water. So like they just casually walked up to them and was like, hey, do you need anything? Do you need like like a blanket or whatever? And like he said something, and then they came back. My friend came back, got some food and water, gave it to him, and he calmed down. And I was like, and this was like, in terms of the average person, this was a menacing looking dude.
Yeah.
Like 6 foot.
And we're taught to fear those. Or, I mean, we don't even see them as like us. It's like ignore the homeless population, and I think it's horrible because if you do treat them like human beings, like you could say hi to them, like I don't know. I hate this culture surrounding like they're so casted out and ignored, and like basic human needs,
totally,
food and water, like
attention, acknowledgement. This person just got one act of kindness, and they like chilled. And that's something that's like, as soon as I saw that happen in front of my eyes, I was like, okay, I just learned a lot about myself and my prejudices, and like how I could be a better person.
Exactly.
So like now, because I like going on walks around the city, it's just like if someone wants to talk to me and they're just like on the street, I talk to them.
Me too.
And I've had some interesting stories.
Yes.
You get the best stories doing that.
They're people too. It's crazy. Like I don't know. I really like what you're saying, and I had a similar experience. On the bus, there was this really loud drunk guy. And there were no seats open, so I went and sat next to him. And I have my headphones in, but I'm just talking to him. And he's repeating himself over and over again. But everyone else on the bus is looking at me like I'm crazy for, interacting with this person that, maybe is disrupting this public bus with his, like, Voodoo Ranger beer.
Sure.
But it was a beautiful moment to me because he was so sweet and kind. And he kept wanting to, like, shake my hand. I was like, maybe I don't want to touch you, but I'll still like socialize with you. And I'm sure he couldn't even see me clearly. He was quite intoxicated, and like maybe that experience does nothing to further his life, but I don't know. It's for both of us to like feel good and feel human. Like, just I don't know. It's crazy when your mind like is so easily switched like that, and you're like, wow, these people are humans just like me. There's really a lot more things that we all have in common than different. And I think with your friend, I can totally relate to that, having a friend that, it's my life's better off without you in it, but you've taught me so much, and we have so much to learn from everybody, and we're always learning, and that's just a beautiful thing. So people just kind of have to try and be curious. And sometimes you're gonna land on your ass or get in trouble or, have some explaining to do. But I don't know, it's a risk that you should take, because a lot of the times you're always learning from failure, from success. I think less from success though, because that, you're going to continue to do the same thing. It's like, all right, let me try a different pathway. And so I don't know, and I also love your way of telling stories, because I'm sure you have a plethora of stories to share.
It was either that one or the meth head who got locked in the bathroom. I was also a very human
here
connection. No, at Lazy Cat Bakery.
Oh yeah.
I resonated with that person so much for no reason. Or for some reason, who knows.
Well, there's a lot more that we share in common with people, because we are people too, as much as it feels like we're all aliens. And so I definitely would I'm so happy that I got to be sat in the podcast today. And talking to you is always lovely, and so I'm definitely going to be maybe seeking out more conversations with you off the mic, so we can get into those.
I'm down.
Real serious off the air topics.
Totally.
But thanks for having me, and good luck editing all this shit.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I feel like I'm mostly gonna do transitions. I feel like I like everything we talked about, and even though there were some strong things in there, feel like we didn't do anything wrong.
And I don't know, some of my fear, like, I don't know, I think I've become a lot more aware of my own deficiencies.
Sure.
And I fear, so there's some people that have that skill of being able to think fast, and I think I do think very quickly, but sometimes the words I use, and that's where like I get into fights with the people that want to be politically correct, and the woke, like what is the proper term, and like I just use words simply, I think, and I'm just trying to explain things that maybe I'm not explaining well, and I am very guilty of just like saying, because a lot of the time that thought is going to be gone if I think about it any more than, oh, what words am I using? So
totally.
I think, you know, there's this idea in Chid where it's like, oh, you know what I mean, but it's like, no, I don't. Explain to me what you mean. Like, please go, like, say more. But I don't know. It's hard to like use proper words, and I think, you know, that comes back to the fear of like being wrong or saying things wrong. Like, what is the other option to just not saying anything?
Totally.
And I think that's more productive to at least put it out there and then offer up debate. And I beg my students all the time, their final assessment is going to be like basically canceling the class. Like, was this a waste of time? Did I waste 2 hours of your day every week? And like, just to be critical of me and like the information that I present. And I don't know, everyone's amygdalas could shrink a little bit because we don't need to fear so much. Yeah. Thank you.
Do you have any final, do you want to plug anything in?
Listen to this podcast and all the other podcasts on this channel, and major in Chid. Take one Chid class if you have it in your schedule. Join the Chid club.
The Chid RSO, yeah.
Yes, join our RSO. Go see your advisor, whatever department you're in.
Yeah.
Yeah. Read some books. What are some books? I guess. Well, just do your own research. Stay curious. And,
stay curious.
Question everything.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Karsten.
Thank you so much, Sophie.